Japanese government says a ballistic missile launched from North Korea has flown over northern Japan and fallen into the Pacific Ocean 2,000 kilometers east of Hokkaido at around 7:16 a.m. local time.
Well, Japan, as we know, is the only country to have suffered nuclear bombardment at the end of the Second World War. Now, that country is often a focus of at least the target of North Korea's rhetorical wrath. But analysts say the debate over whether Tokyo should develop its own nuclear weapons capabilities may now be moving into the political mainstream. VOA's Henry Ridgewell filed this report from the Japanese capital.
A Japanese defense paper this week echoed reported concerns among US intelligence that Pyongyang has achieved the key final step of miniaturizing nuclear warheads. Former Defense Ministry advisor Narushige Michishita.
It is possible, or quite likely even, that North Korea can attack Tokyo with nuclear weapons today. And if missiles is launched, it will reach Japan within 10 minutes.
Mattis told reporters that Washington needs to maintain all three components of its nuclear trade after some critics recently argued that land-based missiles may no longer be necessary.
North Korea is believed to have more than 200 missiles capable of hitting Japan. An attack on a crowded city like Tokyo would put hundreds of thousands of lives at risk. Japan's constitution allows military action only in self-defense. Hawkish conservatives, including Finance Minister Taro Aso, argue Japan should keep open the option of developing nuclear weapons. The issue is openly debated in South Korea, but polls show just 5% of Japanese want the country to be a nuclear power.
ちょうどホテルで起きて準備している途中だったんで、念のためということでシャワールームに入りまして困ったもんですね。
何事もなくてよかったんですが、いつかもしかしたらと思うとちょっと怖い。
We also asked people in Shibuya, downtown Tokyo.
It can be a very scary time. You don't know what's going to happen, what they're going to do, how the rest of the world will respond.
It's a little bit scary. I don't like the fact that that's happening, and I know politics right now are very heated, so it's a little bit tense, but we're going to still try and enjoy our time.
I think the majority of the people are looking for peace, not those type of war actions. We hope the situation comes down.
So, is fire the only way to fight fire? Well, joining us now to look at options for South Korea and the United States, we are joined here in Washington by VOA Korean Service Chief Dong-hyuk Lee and by VOA Senior Investigative Reporter Jeffrey Young. I thank you both for joining us. Dong-hyuk, since you are the chief of our Korea service, I want to talk to you about this. Every time this issue has come up, the reaction from South Koreans seems to be a little bit of complacency. Oh, he's done this before. Does this escalating war of words change that calculus a little bit?
Well, in the past, as you have mentioned, South Koreans have been showing a remarkable calmness to North Korea's threats, to the point of being a little bit callous even. But I think this time situations are a little bit different, and South Korea's stocks and currency have fallen, and people appear to be a little bit more worried about than before about the situation. Well, what's the difference? The difference is South Koreans are familiar with North Korea's bellicose, rhetoric and their, old-fashioned threats. But this time, President Trump has made a really strong statement and direct warning against North Korea, and that might have gotten the attention of South Koreans.
So, Jeff, you've been looking at this issue for quite some time now as our strategic asset analyst. But in terms of North Korea's nuclear capabilities, how far along have they come? Are they as advanced as some of the media seems to be suggesting?
They have yet to launch a device or detonate a device underground that is in excess of roughly 20 kilotons. Mm-hmm. And what they need for an effective warhead, if they want to compare it to the United States, would be in the range of 330 to 470 kilotons. This is what we have. The Russians have warheads as big as 20 megatons, but that's for different purposes. But for North Korea's use.
But regardless of the size of that, Jeff,
Okay.
I mean, do they have the capability to reach the mainland United States?
When you look at missiles, when you look at range, you have a inverse relationship between the weight of the missile and the weight of the payload and the range of the missile. The heavier the payload, the heavier the missile, the shorter the range. So the problem with North Korea at this point, technically, is that they have not been able to build an effective warhead that, yes, can fit on a missile and deliver a big enough payload that has an effective detonation to reach the United States. They don't have something light enough to be carried far enough. And this is where the inverse relationship so far is protecting the United States. But the clock is ticking.
Yes, it is. And Dong Hyuk, the reason why we're talking about this and speculating about what might happen is because the president, after his fire and fury comments, actually doubled down on those comments, suggesting that he should have been tougher against Pyongyang. Are South Koreans worried about this kind of back and forth between the United States and Pyongyang?
I would say so. If you go back to what happened in April, when President Trump met with President Xi Jinping of China, President Trump ordered the airstrikes on Syria, which made huge news in South Korea, which has rattled the South Korean market at the time. So now the South Korean press is comparing that situation to the latest development. So yes, they are worried about what is going on right now between Washington and Pyongyang. Yeah.
So Jeffrey, what kinds of options are available to the United States? How do we fight back against this threat?
Well, they stack in this order. The first one is a preemptive pad attack. In other words, the United States destroys the missiles on the pad before the missiles are launched. This obviously is an act of war in anyone's definition under international law. That's option number one. The second option would be to use the Aegis missile defense system. We have vessels from the United States Pacific Fleet that are deployable on either side of the Korean coast, so that if the missiles are fired from either the west or the east side, the Aegis system works in what's called exo-atmosphere. A missile has a trajectory. When the missile exits the atmosphere and before its re-entry, that's when Aegis can hit it. Aegis has a roughly 75 to 80% success rate on ship-fired missiles. That is option number two. Option number three would be what's called THAAD, which is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. THAAD is already deployed to Guam. The deployment happened in April of 2013. THAAD is, according to Lockheed Martin, its manufacturer, a 100% success rate. So that leaves you the options with a fourth, and that is the most dangerous one, and that is leadership decapitation.
We can talk about that a little bit further because that's getting really into speculative territory. But I want to talk to you, Dong Hyuk, about THAAD. I know that was a political issue during the last presidential elections. Do South Koreans have faith in the effectiveness of THAAD, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System?
Well, I think among experts and even among the public, I think there seems to be split opinions and split views. You know, there are some people who believe that the system is capable enough, you know, to deter North Korea's missiles and defend South Korea from North Korea's missile threats. At the same time, there are some experts who are still remain sort of skeptical whether the system is really able to defend South Korea from North Korea's threats.
Jeffrey, you just mentioned this. What's the possibility there of other options? You suggested decapitation of leadership. Is that a realistic thing is that something that we would look at aside from, say, a preemptive strike?
When we did endless games theory in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, we looked at leadership decapitation. In fact, we even did some research into what it would take to be able to take out leadership bunkers and remove the leadership of an adversary. The problem with this, and this is very important for people to consider, you have to have someone to turn off the war. If you decapitate the leadership, you are automatically guaranteeing what is called a second responsive strike.
I assume that North Koreans have already looked at that possibility. I thank you, Dong Hyuk and Jeffrey Young.